meeting, Cabinet meeting, Monday the 13th of April here at the Town Hall. So I welcome officers who are joining us this evening, members that are maybe online, and any members of the public that are online, and any in the gallery. So I think we're really ready to go. Minutes of the last meeting, if I could have authorisation to sign those minutes.
So moved.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Apologies for absence, Lisa.
Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Giawan and Timpey.
Thank you. Are there any additional agenda items?
There are none.
Are there any urgent decisions?
There are none.
Thank you. Disclosure of interests and dispensations. To receive any disclosures by members of disclosable pecuniary interests and other registrable interests, non-registrable interests in matters on the agenda, and the nature of any interest and details of any dispensations obtained. Members are reminded of the need to repeat their declaration immediately prior to the commencement of the item in question. Councillor Projax, here.
Thank you, Chair. Agenda item 7, the Renters' Rights Act, and I will leave the meeting as I have a prejudicial interest, as I have a flat which is rented out.
Thank you. Councillor Bayliss, Christine?
Yes, I'm declaring an interest in that I am the freeholder of property in Bexhill, which is let out on a very long lease. I understand that I do not need, it's not prejudicial interest because obviously I'm not a private landlord, but I am declaring it for transparency purposes.
Thank you for that. Are there any members online who would need to declare? Thank you, Paul. Councillor Paul Osborne.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I need to declare a personal and prejudicial interest in agenda item 7 as a private and commercial landlord. I do think it's a shame that we have to do this declaring interest, because obviously there's questions I might would have liked to have asked, but I can't. So I shall have to leave, switch off and try and come back somehow. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I think it's been noted. Are there any other declarations of any other items? No, there aren't. Let's move into the first budget item. Sorry, the first, yes, item 6, the budget monitoring. And therefore I would invite Director of Resources, Charlotte Spendley, to present this report in the absence of Councillor Giawan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report covers the Q3 monitoring position, which we've actually taken at period 10 as the data was available when we drew together the report. The headline from this report is that we now anticipate drawing from reserves by 1.075 million compared to the budgeted position of 694,000. That is a slight improvement of just over £100,000 from the Q2 reported position. Broadly speaking, the themes are in line with previous reporting. We have a number of staff variances which are generating savings. These are being offset by interim staff costs. Our planning income is forecast to be significantly lower than budgeted, around about 450,000 below the budgeted level, but we have reduced staff costs in that area, largely interim staff costs, to partially offset that position. Parking income continues to track higher than the budgeted level, and we have received additional grants and delivered savings on the street cleansing, waste and beach cleansing contracts that are reported. Perhaps more notable is financing costs, which have moved adversely in year. We have a reduction of interest receivable of 583,000, which is largely due to reducing balances available to invest. We've also had to borrow additional sums this financial year, so that is an adverse position compared to the budget that was set. We also have a reduction in grant due to an error at budget setting. Overall, from revenue purposes, we will draw a further 381,000 from reserves based on this monitoring position, And in addition, as we have discussed at previous Cabinet meetings, we do anticipate utilising just over £1 million, 1.057 million, in respect of the aborted capital schemes and the loss on the Hermes Property Fund. Those things combined mean that the general reserve would stand at 2.87 million at year end. There are no significant changes to the capital programme forecast at this point. I would just draw your attention to paragraph 19 in the covering report to this paper, just with regards to the housing company. We are forecast to receive a significant amount of interest payable from the housing company this year. However, we won't receive the actual physical payment of those monies. They will be rolled up within the housing company until they're in a position to start to repay the loans, and therefore haven't included that within the kind of overarching numbers brought to your attention due to the need that loan interest needing to materialise in cash terms. And then just very finally, I'll just draw your attention to paragraph 20, which references the changes to the local government pension scheme for elected members from the 1st of April 2026. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charlotte. Are there any questions from within the chamber? Councillor Bayliss, Christine.
Yes, some questions and some observations. The first one is on paragraph 7J around neighbourhood services. Really pleased to see the increase in car park income. And one of the areas that I've sort of been working on, I suppose, since 2019 is Wainwright Road car park, where it was very, very underutilised. And I always felt that actually putting charges on there would be detrimental. But I'm very pleased to say I was wrong. I visited recently and was very pleased to find actually only a few spaces available. It was pretty full. And I spoke to the officer who runs the car parking division. She was telling me that the income on that car park has virtually doubled in 12 months. So obviously Wainwright Road is now becoming the long stay car park to use if you're working in the town centre. That's got to be a good thing and something we need to keep promoting. There was another point on at paragraph F where I was looking at the voids about where we've got assets where we haven't sort of quite yet got to leasing those assets, and that there was a cost regarding 34 Devonshire Road, which is of course the community hub that Rother has purchased, and which I thought is now on a long lease to Rother Voluntary Action. And I just wondered if there's confirmation, maybe from the assets team, that that will be a cost that they will pick up in future and not Rother District Council, and that would have to be paid by them as whilst on the lease. And then finally, just to ask a question about actually the next year's budget, and we all know that fuel prices have increased significantly, and I wondered if Charlotte is able to sort of tell us a little bit about risk assessments too, because obviously if our fuel bills go up double, that is going to have a significant budget implication, a risk to the budget implication. So I would just like to ask about what risk assessment we've done on that and what the impact is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Can I invite a response to the first point on the RVA hub and the business rates? Have you got an answer, Ben or Joe?
I might need to come back to you on the details. My understanding would be that it would be, but I just want to double check the lease to make sure that that's exactly right. But we are in the lease now, and I expect that is the situation, but I'll just double check.
Okay, thanks for that confirmation. And Charlotte, if you can go back on that other point, please.
Yes, thank you. So, I mean, addressing fuel specifically first, fortunately, the council entered into some long-term agreements around its electricity and gas provision for our kind of core estates properties, in September, end of September last year, following a procurement exercise. So we have a 3-year fixed agreement. So that would move with volume, but not with price. So that's a positive. So we're in a strong position in that regard. Obviously, that doesn't insulate us completely from all fuel-related pressures because, of course, it spreads across the entire supply chain. We did make provision for inflation in the 26-27 budget where there was a kind of contractual commitment to do so. We didn't make a kind of broad inflationary creep on all budgets because that would be unaffordable for the council to do so. So there is inflation built into the budget. Salaries inflation, as you'll know from the budget setting process, we've forecast 3%. The ask is significantly more. So that is probably the area that we're most exposed on. And we are continuing to evaluate all of the capital scheme, particularly the ones that are moving into procurement now, because that's where we are at the greatest risk of volatility. And it will be the case that as those move through procurement, if they are significantly adrift from the budget that we've set, then we'll need to come back to members to ask for agreement, either to vary the budget, or if the schemes are no longer viable, or the financials don't stack up due to rising costs, and there may be different decisions to take.
Yes, could I just say, I mean, is that the reference to Barnhorn Green project where we've not quite yet, Barnhorn Green, and these haven't yet been tendered? Is that your reference?
Yes, yes, that scheme, definitely. But there are other schemes moving into procurement, for instance, Delaware, which is a significant scheme. So, yeah, there will be other schemes in addition to Barnhorn. Yeah.
Is that fine, Christine? Yep, okay. Thank you very much, Charlotte. I think it was Catherine, Councillor Field. Catherine, please.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask a question about the capital programme in Appendix B, and it's line 70782, which is headed Battle Train Station, and the pedant tells me it should be a Battle Railway Station, because that's what it is. But it's £1 million from SIL. Now, I just immediately assumed it was the downside access from Blackfriars, but I then wondered, is it actually about getting over the platform in Battle Station itself? And if so, what do people know that I don't? Because it isn't forecast, this money, to be going on past the end of this financial year.
Specifics of that particular project, then I do.
Are you there, Duncan? Yes.
Evening, members. Evening, Chair.
Did you catch that question, Duncan, okay? Or do you want it repeated?
I did.
Oh, good. Okay.
No, I did hear it fine, thank you. I will have to get some further detail from the SIL team on that one to just share with you to say exactly what that is going to provide. It's an externally funded SIL provision, so it's not one of the council's projects, but I should be able to get the project brief for you from Aaron, Councillor Fields, if that's okay, and then I can share that with you, and that should cover exactly what that project is going to deliver.
Thank you very much. Would you share it with Councillor Cook as well, because it's her ward? Thank you.
Yep, certainly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Duncan. Council Project, Sue?
Thank you. I remember that we had committed ourselves to a feasibility study for a access from the site. So that was going to be a quick feasibility study. But then I think this money, the other money, was for the lift for the station. So, but maybe that could be confirmed. I've had my one or two questions answered, but I did want to bring up again in the savings, which I was a bit concerned about, which was enforcement savings now has been explained to me that is actually a staffing issue which has been resolved, and it's not anywhere near cutting the service at all. Because as we know, enforcement is one of our favourite topics in the rural areas particularly. But the savings I was concerned about was the low-level pollution, graffiti and nuisance vehicles and barking dogs, etc. Because these are things that actually do blight people's lives considerably. And I just crossed my mind that maybe it's something the parishes could pick up, or somehow we could get that looked at again, because it's quite an important area. The other area that I'd like to make sure we have information on is the cost of LGR. I'm thinking this morning we talked about Lorna's, the Chief Executive's time particularly. I mean, I know we've got a bit of money for the business plan that we produced, but I think we need to make sure that we cost that properly. Thank you.
Charlotte, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I was just going to clarify. So we did have government grant for the LGR business case that went forward. This council's share of the cost related to the business plan was 38,000, but we only paid £6,000 of that out of pocket in essence. The remainder was covered by grant. In terms of the broader costs of LGR, it was one of the themes within the productivity plan last year in terms of areas that we may be able to fund from use of flexible capital receipts. But I completely agree. We do need to capture all officer time, and we will start to do so this year. Yeah.
I suppose it's fair to say that a lot of the work hasn't yet started, and I think that's the scary thing. When all of a sudden there's a lot of work to be done, which is going to impact on officers' time and capacity. So yeah, that's to come. Any other questions? Sorry, where?
The enforcement question.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, Richard, did you pick up that question on enforcement and barking dogs and things?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, obviously we made savings to the budget last year in terms of reduction of the staff numbers who deal with these elements of enforcement. We were intending to go out to contract again for another enforcement company. But the situation we now have is that the government's guidance is that we should not be seeking to make a profit, or any of our contractors making a profit from issuing fixed penalty notices, which somewhat obviously limits our ability to have a contractor, because obviously the contractor will want to be paid. Therefore, it's something we're going to have to review during the year to see how we can operate, carrying out further enforcement, but actually using income from the fixed penalty notices.
Thank you for that. Sue, are you comfortable with?
Actually, I notice as well, it says feeding birds can be a nuisance.
Yeah, indeed. I think that the previous arrangements we had has left a legacy of people acknowledging the fact that there might be somebody peeping over the wall at them, and that they would need to take steps accordingly. Any other questions on this item? No? I'd just like to thank Chair of Scrutiny for the work they did on this. There was no recommendations from the scrutiny meeting back in March, so again acknowledge the involvement for there. Okay, shall we move on? The next item is item 7. Why have I lost that? Excuse me. Oh, yes, I will find it now. The Renters Reform Rights Act. What page is this? So I can. Yeah, I've got it. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Right. The Renters Rights Act 2025 enforcement policy. This is a report from Richard Parker Harding, Head of Environmental Services, Licensing and Community Safety.
Just before, can I redeclare prejudicial, personal prejudice, and I'll leave the room.
Sorry, I will declare my non-prejudicial interest.
If I may, Chairman, I'll redeclare mine as well and switch off. Thank you.
Thank you. So all declarations have been made, 1 or 2 have left. We've got a situation where you're going to present this, Rory, as Councillor McCourt. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair. As your lead member for housing, I'm absolutely delighted with this. Hallelujah. At last, this draconian and illiberal piece of legislation is being removed from the statute books from the 1st of May. I think it's good news. I think it's good news for tenants. And I think it also goes some way to rebalancing that imbalance of power that exists between landlords and tenants. And so I welcome it, and I'm sure colleagues around the table will welcome it as well. There are a few caveats to that, though, of course. I mean, the Conservatives, it was in their manifesto in 2019, for various reasons, which I won't rehearse, they never got round to actually implementing that. So I'm delighted that the Labour government has implemented this and got rid of Section 21 from May the 1st. One of the issues, and it's been highlighted in the paper, is that in the last 6 months there has been a rush of some landlords using Section 21 to gain possession of properties. The Housing Minister, in fact, Steve Reid, yesterday I think said, accused some landlords of shameless behaviour in rushing through their possession proceedings before the Act comes into force. And the housing charity Acorn provided some evidence that Section 21 accounted for 1 in 5 evictions last autumn, October time, and this has risen to 1 in 3 by January. So as the paper does say, there will be a glut of these sorts of possessions which will go through and will put a bit of pressure on our temporary accommodation as it stands at the moment. But in many ways that sort of emboldens the policy that we had of increasing temporary accommodation to cope with that. As I said, I described as draconian and illiberal. I've worked for 4 housing associations over several decades, and when I used to go to court to both gain possession from tenants, but also to mitigate that by seeking suspended possession orders to enable tenants to either pay their arrears through a repayment plan or mitigate their behaviour if it was antisocial behaviour, I was acutely aware that judges really disliked Section 21 because as a mandatory ground, there was no defence against it. You just had to give possession, and it seemed really unfair on tenants. And indeed, there has been evidence that some tenants who you're described as model tenants who've always paid their rent on time, many in advance, who've never created any issues, and have been resident for many years, could be evicted through Section 21, and some have been, and that's disgraceful, really. I would also say, do we really want rogue landlords who utilise this in such a way? I think it's important that tenants are not suffering the uprooting of their families due to unfair eviction. So I welcome this. What I would say, though, is that there's a big focus on the Section 21 element, quite rightly. But the new Act also brings in several other grounds, which will probably be used by landlords. There's the new ground 1, where if you or a close family member intend to reoccupy the property, you can seek possession on that ground. Not applicable within the first 12 months of a new tenancy, and you have to have 4 months and notice required for that. There's also ground 1A. If you're selling the house, only if it's an assured short-hold tenancy. Longer tenancies do not apply for that. And interestingly, ground 8, which is the rent arrears ground, now stipulates that if you're 13 weeks, 3 months rent in arrears, you can seek possession as a landlord. But a tenant will not be able to be evicted if they have not received their universal credit. So that's another safeguard against eviction. A couple of other things just in passing for interest. New ground 14ZA on rioting, believe it or not. If a tenant is convicted of an offence during a riot, a landlord can seek to evict you for that. And ground 18, supported accommodation. If a tenant is not cooperating with the support provided, that is also grounds for possession. So that could well be an interesting use of that. But generally speaking, I would say this is good news. I welcome it, and I hope the colleagues would welcome it as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. No, sorry, that wasn't the hand.
Just twitching.
Twitching, okay. Councillor Bayliss, Christine.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I'd like to echo what Councillor McCall has said. As a member for Central Ward in Bexhill, I probably got possibly the highest percentage of privately rented accommodation in the district. I've either myself or the councillors representing the Sidley wards. But in my 7 years of being a councillor, I have to say that some of the most upsetting casework that I've had to deal with has been people who've been evicted through no fault of their own. As Councillor McCall says, paid their rent, been model tenants, and they've been evicted. And it really is, it is very distressing for those people, and to be frank, I found it quite distressing to help sort out other alternative accommodation for them. So I really welcome this, and yeah, it's something that we would have hoped back in 2019 when the last Conservative government was elected on a manifesto to include, you know, a ban on Section 21 evictions. That this is long overdue, and thank the government for their work on this. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Christine. Online, Councillor Gareth Delaney. Gareth?
Yeah, thanks. Apologies for my lateness, by the way. Yeah, with this bit, I just wanted to mention the decent home standard. It's great. It's certainly great that private landlords will be held to the same standards as social landlords going forward. But it is something that we'll need to keep an eye on, because the enforcement of that and Richard's team and their capacity to be able to enforce that, we will need to keep an eye on, because it's certainly a really important thing, that an important power that we will have going forward, but it's nothing if we're not actually able to enforce it. So we'll need to look at our staffing and how they're coping with those new powers. But it's certainly part of them.
Thank you, Gareth. Councillor John Barnes. John?
Yes, I don't think anybody will be sorry to see the end of Section 21, but I'm glad Councillor Delaney has emphasised the impact for us, as indeed did Councillor McCourt. I am slightly worried that the overall impact may be to diminish the number of landlords at a time when houses are not being built and registered providers are also not actually particularly active in building new houses. There may be a role for our housing company, but I'll come back to that on a later item. But the worry for me, I think, is how we're going to implement this, because there are certain requirements laid on us which will involve a considerable increase in the enforcement team, probably a doubling over time. And looking forward to local government reorganisation, I think it's not merely exploring the option of working with other councils. I think we should put a high priority on trying to make this a shared service as far as we can, because the unitary will obviously have to bear the main burden of enforcing this as time goes on. There's a cost to that, and has any estimate also been made on the effect on homelessness? I'm pretty sure we will get a temporary blip. I'm just wondering whether we've estimated what that is going to cost us.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for those comments. Perhaps I can invite Richard. Would you like to make any observations to those points, Richard? I know it's a very early stage, but I'm sure there has been some preparation with others.
Thank you, Leader. In terms of carrying out enforcement, one of the philosophies behind the Act is that the additional enforcement officers we will need will be paid for from income from the Council issuing civil penalties, which is obviously why we need to adopt a new enforcement policy and why we need to adopt a civil penalties policy, which tells you how to calculate the civil penalties. Civil penalties have been around for some time, and in the past we have issued civil penalties in lieu of prosecution. So that's something which we have some experience of, but obviously the philosophy behind the Act is we should issue more civil penalties, giving us the income to be able to employ more enforcement officers. As at the moment we have a very small team. Moving forward with a unitary authority, it will be a significantly larger team, which will help in terms of enforcement. I don't know if Joe would like to say something about the temporary accommodation costs.
Thank you, Richard. Joe, would you like to add?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Chair. It's notoriously challenging to predict or project what the likely rise in the homelessness number will actually be. We are prepared for, I think I agree, that a likely rise as far as we're able. But yeah, in terms of projecting it, it's very difficult. I mean, we've had changes in legislation in the past, and our learning from those changes, perhaps less significant than these changes, is that the impact is less than the bite's less worse than the bark, if you know what I mean. And that a lot of people may threaten to evict and even get to the point of issuing Section 21s, but that once things embed, it's more of a protest action often. So we will keep it under review, and we'll keep you updated, but notoriously challenging to project exactly what we would experience. We're also working with our East Sussex housing partners across East Sussex to keep an eye on it as well.
Yeah, thanks for those added comments. Are there any other questions or points to be raised? If not, we can look to move this report. Councillor McCaw, second. And those in favour, resolved items 1 and 2. That's excellent. Thank you very much. Yes, a recommendation as, yeah, to comply with new legislation.
Can somebody alert the councillor who withdrew, that we've now finished that item?
I've just lost my screen now.
He's back.
Right. I think I'm there. Bear with me. Agenda item 8. Sorry, my screen sort of decided to go on walkabouts. Agenda item 8. This is the King offer proposed sale of land. Are we looking to go into confidential session immediately, or?
Joe was going to present it.
You're going to present the report, Joe, or is Rory going to present it? Okay, thank you. Right, okay then, where you go.
Thank you, Chair. Even more good news. This is great. I mean, obviously this is regarding the sale of Rother District Council owned land at the old King office site for affordable housing. You'll recall that in July last year, Cabinet agreed in principle to sell the site. And since then, well, the good news is that Joe and his team have been marketing exercise has resulted in an offer from a registered provider, which is brilliant. It's just what we want. And, you know, in many ways, the registered provider also takes the planning risk, which is, you know, something as well. And although what we're getting through the sale is below what you would achieve in an open market sale, it's beneficial to us in several ways. Firstly, and importantly, it secures 100% affordable housing on the site, which is brilliant, again, given the need that we have for affordable and social housing in the district. And it also delivers 45 or even up to 49 additional affordable homes beyond the planning requirement. So that's excellent as well. So as far as I'm concerned, this is, you know, I hope the colleagues would support this. This is great. And the additional social value that is represented by this sale and the registered provider building affordable housing represents best consideration on the Local Government Act. So it's great news. That's all I would say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rory, out there. No, Joe, did you want to add anything?
Only to take a step back and look at this in the context of the housing development strategy that the council has adopted, and this is a real opportunity for the council to, I think, to leave a housing legacy alongside a Blackfriars scheme that the housing company has brought forward, and this is a real material, significant increase in affordable housing, which the market would struggle to provide. So yeah, really positive step forward, and you know, just to put it into context, that's somewhere in the region of 20% of our current households in temporary accommodation, just in the additional affordable homes. So really, really important.
Yeah, totally agree. Councillor Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to vocally support this because it's obviously my ward and the site has been brownfield for a while. It's great that it's a brownfield housing application, and the affordability of the houses is a great if it stays at 100%. Yeah, so wonderful. Thank you.
It's a superb opportunity, and I think we would all want to support that. Rory, you're going to move this report? Oh, sorry, John, I didn't see. You seem to be an awful long way away from me. I didn't see you. Right, yes, carry on, John.
Yes, and I hope I'm not trenching in things which will force us into confidential session. But I wanted really to explore two aspects just to make sure they're covered off. One is the overall impact on our finances, because we're going to write off 500,000 on this site at some stage. I'm not sure whether the New Deal will prevent that from happening. It would be good news if it did. It's very welcome that we're going to get the increase in affordable housing, but it did seem to me, as I went deeper into the item, that it's quite a long way off. It looks as if the deal may not be completed until the unitary is at least in shadow being, and possibly not until it's in being, which is some way down the line. I just wondered if we had evaluated using our housing company, now that Blackfriars is virtually complete, and whether we ought possibly to be thinking of not just registered providers, but whether we ourselves should be building houses and using the housing company for that, and whether that was evaluated as a possible option for this site, whether it would have been better value or whether this is the best deal that we can do. Sorry to raise that question, but it's quite an important one, I think, given Blackfriars is nearing completion.
Thank you, John. Could I invite Charlotte to respond to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the Brownfield Land Release Fund, which I think is the element that you're referring to, Councillor Barnes, has been partially used for the demolition work. In terms of the housing company itself, I mean, that's not the direction of travel that Cabinet previously took with this particular parcel of land. The decision that was taken by Cabinet back in July, I think it was, did ask us to explore options for the disposal of this site. So that's what officers have done. They've travelled down that path and explored the options available in terms of the disposal to a third party for affordable homes. That's not to say that you couldn't take a different decision, but that's the decision that was taken and that's been explored and is brought to conclusion in this paper.
Yes, I took it that this is a good offer in terms of RP. I just wondered if the Cabinet oughtn't to look at the other option and see if it would be even better value, and what is more important, faster, because what worries me at the moment is that this is the transaction is not going to be complete until at least 2027, maybe even 2028, and the building, in my experience, will be at least a year after that. And we have a housing crisis, frankly.
Yeah, thank you, John. Joe, would you like just to respond on one or two of those?
Yeah, just well, 2 points really. I think first is that the housing company's express purpose is to bring forward policy compliant schemes. So we would lose the additional affordable homes if the company were to be used as a vehicle. And then secondly, I'd say in terms of timeframes, the site only has an outline planning permission presently. So any new developer would need to submit a full reserve matters planning application on which this time frame has been built. So any developer taking this site on would have the same time constraints, albeit within a range, I suppose, of 6 months or so, maybe either side. But it would be a long way from being a developable site in any scenario.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Rory McCord.
Just briefly, Chair, on that issue of the housing company, Orbit are a very large housing association with considerable resources, so the receipts, as part of this, that they're buying the land. I very much doubt the housing company has got the capital to engage in this sort of transaction.
Okay. Any other points we raised? Councillor Projects?
I'm not sure if this needs to be in confidential session, but you say, housing...
It might be safest to do so.
Okay, I'll move that then.
Yep, thank you very much. So, if that's okay, Lisa.
The comment I was going to make in question to Councillor Barnes's legitimate question about the housing company is that we don't know yet about the housing company.
We're back live now. I got carried away. Okay, if we can...
Yes,
to approve
Chair, I'd
the
like to move
terms
the
of a proposed
recommendation.
conditional sale for the delivery of affordable housing.
Yeah.
The second, those in favour? And that's unanimous. And we'll leave this now for officers to move it to whatever direction we need to move it pretty quickly, I suppose. But I'm sure there will be things that will get in the way. Thank you. What page have I got to now? Can you give me a page number, somebody, please?
129.
129.
C9. And we need to go back into confidential section.
Right. Okay, this is agenda item 11. Okay. Can you...
Agenda item number 11?
Yes.
Yes, can I move that we move into...
9.
Yeah, but we moved to agenda item number 9, exclusion of press and public.
Okay. So where are we?
11.
11, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody said 9. I got a bit confused. I thought I'd what happened? We're not into confidential yet.
Goodbye.
Right, we're back into public session, and that concludes the business this evening, I think, at whatever time it is.
1938.
1938. Thank you, everyone that contributed this evening.